Okay, so welcome to today's special clinic. So I'm Kelly, I work at Jisc, I'm subject specialist for assistive technology, and I am going to try and keep my nattering to a minimum because we want to hear from our guests today as much as possible. I really want to welcome Rob Haverty from Adobe, who'll be leading the session today. All beaming in from thousands of miles away where it's only 7:30 in the morning. So impressed. Before we kick off with Rob though, I think we want to have a quick hello from Rob's colleague who's based actually quite close to me in Edinburgh in the UK, Alistair Black from Adobe. Hi Alistair, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself?
Sure, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, really quickly. So I'm a customer success manager working with Adobe. We're here in the UK. But just really quickly to say that if any of the institutions are interested in finding out more about what we're doing in the area of accessibility, or if you're interested in a discussion or an event specifically with your institution, then to reach out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a little Microsoft form link in the chat that you can fill out if you are interested, and we'll get back to you about that. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alistair. That's great. So I think now we'll hand over, just to make the most of having you with us, Rob. I'll hand over to you and let you introduce yourself and just really kick off and tell us all about the wonders of PDF accessibility.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly. So my name is Rob Haverty, and I am a product manager on the corporate accessibility team at Adobe. And we have several product managers, and we sort of all focus in different areas of the company and partner with our product teams to help them make their products accessible. And my expertise is in our Document Cloud products like Acrobat and Adobe Sign and PDF accessibility. I've been doing accessibility for 25 years now. I was at Microsoft for 19 years and then came over to Adobe about 6 years ago. I'm going to apologize. I am getting over a cold, so I may have a little bit of a raspy voice and an occasional cough, so I apologize in advance for that. Let's see why my controls aren't working. There we go. All right, so we have a lot of stuff to go over. There is a lot of detail around PDF accessibility. And at the end, when I point out the resources, we actually have some recorded online trainings that have exercises and solutions. So you can take the training and then you can practice on your own time and learn some of the more nuanced information. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the basics of PDF and Acrobat, and just sort of the accessibility space around PDF a little bit. Then we'll talk a little bit about the source document and converting to a PDF document, some of the basics on remediation. Pretty much everything flows out of the basics, and if you get those nailed, it's easy to learn the next steps. And then time permitting, I'm going to talk a little bit about things that are coming down the road that are kind of secret. Some of the future enhancements we're doing to make it easier to make PDFs accessible and to actually access data and information out of a PDF. And then, of course, I have my resources. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I will try to save time to get to the questions. However, like I said, it's a fairly packed hour. I actually do a 2-day session on PDF accessibility, so I can literally talk for days on PDF. So let's start with what everybody wants. Everybody wants a magic button. We want to be able to say, here's my PDF, click this button, and it is perfectly accessible. For those of you who have been working in accessibility a lot, you know that just isn't gonna happen. It doesn't matter what document format you're using, there is always work that has to be done in order to make something accessible. What we're trying to do at Adobe is to get as close to that magic button as possible and make things as easy as possible. So let's talk a little bit about the basics here. And I always like to start with compliance. As I say at the bottom of the slide, compliance is really not the ultimate goal here. It's just the start of accessibility, and really it's about making sure that the user has a great experience. There are many regulations worldwide Fortunately, most of them are relatively harmonized. There was the UN Convention on Persons with Rights, UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and that came out quite a while back now. That's almost probably 10 years ago now. And the goal of that was really to make sure every country had laws supporting people with disabilities, and that they were all relatively consistent. And I know in the UK, there's the Disability Discrimination Act, which is one of those that is very similar. At a sort of broader level in Europe, you have the European Accessibility Act. This is relatively new and is really important because it's going to apply to everybody pretty much who does any business within Europe. And whether you're part of the EU or not, and it will become enforceable in 2025, which seems like a long way away, but it really isn't. You know, we think about the last 2 years of the pandemic, and you know that went relatively quickly, albeit painfully. And what that has done is really take the European Accessibility Standard, EN 301549, and harmonize that across Europe. So there is a standard that pretty much covers all of ICT. So anything to do with computers, you know, if you look at it that way. For content, it specifically references the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. And one of the things that's really interesting is, you know, that name is going to change. So be aware of that. Because it says web is kind of irrelevant anymore. EN 301549, other countries like the United States and Canada have incorporated this into their laws and standards to say that all content has to meet these guidelines. So it is referenced in the various standards. It comes out of the World Wide Web Consortium, but it is also an ISO standard, which is really important because ISO kind of controls all of the, you know, international standards, whether it's security, privacy, you know, or accessibility. And you know, the standard for compliance currently is WCAG 2.1 level AA. WCAG 2.2 is coming out probably in the next year. But it takes time for those to actually become part of laws or become, you know, adopted. So then we get to the last standard I want to talk about, which is PDF UA. UA stands for Universal Access. It is also an ISO standard, and it is a subset of the larger PDF standard, which is hundreds of pages long and, quite frankly, very complex and hard to understand. And the idea behind the PDF UA standard was to kind of narrow down the information in the full PDF standard to what is really critical and important for accessibility. And it's referenced in WCAG because there is 1-2 criterion within WCAG where, you know, in order to meet them with a PDF, you really have to do what PDF UA says. So it sort of is a, you know, it's kind of a cascade. You know, it's like, hey, everybody's got to support people with disabilities. And then you kind of work down to, oh, now I'm talking about a PDF, and this is some of the details I need to know. So the idea behind PDF UA is to provide information about the text, the structure, and the organization of the content to assistive technologies. So, for example, a screen reader. One of the key and important elements, if you've been working in PDF accessibility, you know that there are multiple views of the structure of the document. You have the order panel, you have the content panel, and you have the tag tree or the structure tree. The standard specifically says the structure tree or the tag tree must be in the logical reading order. So as we move forward today, you will see that I'm going to spend a lot of time in the tag tree. We're going to be mostly, I'm going to jump out of these slides very shortly, and we'll dive into Acrobat and actually work through some issues. One of the other things is you may, as an organization, define things specifically, because most standards have things that they say you must do, and then they have things that you may do. And one of the examples in PDF UA is lists. You must have a list tag and a list item tag. If you don't know what a tag is, don't worry, we'll get to that. You may have an LBL or label tag, like for the bullet, and you may have an L body tag for the content, but you don't have to. So it depends on the standard. Standards changing in the near future. So there'll be some other things like adding a document tag as the first tag in the tag tree. There's a thing called the Matterhorn protocol that comes out of the PDF Association, which helps you understand more about PDF UA. And there also is an accessibility checker that is free that lets you check against PDF UA. And we'll talk about the checker in Acrobat in just a moment. So this is kind of sort of a philosophical question, and I don't have an answer for you particularly, but it's something to think about. When is good enough good enough? So when at the end of the day, I want my PDF or any of my content to be 100% accessible and the absolute best it can be. But does it really have to meet the standard fully? Does it really have to be a PDF UA compliant document? I would encourage you to consider a couple of things. One is your audience. A lot of times in educational spaces, a student needs material tomorrow for their class. And if you have a disability office that does remediation for students, it may be that you don't really need to go to all the detail. They just want to be able to read the document and understand the content. And so if it is not structured 100% correctly, that may be okay in this situation. Is the content posted internally? Theoretically, your standard should be the same between whether it's posted internally or externally. But quite frankly, if you're going to get sued or someone is going to come after you, they're going to look at the external content first. And so I'm not encouraging not to make something fully accessible, but I'm encouraging you to think about the priority of your work and how far do I need to go. Some of the other things to think about with regard to the type of the content. Is it just a short-term content? Is it something that is going to live for just a little bit? Well, maybe it doesn't actually need to be PDF UA. It needs to be fully usable by someone with an assistive technology, but maybe you don't need to meet PDF UA. Is it frequently accessed content? This is content that you're going to want to go to the last mile and make sure that you have done everything completely correct. Is it legacy content? Is it stuff that you may be pulling down? Is it stuff that is old and not very often accessed? Maybe it's sufficient to just do the basics for that. Is it complex content? The more complex the content is, the more work that you're going to have to do in order to make it accessible. So when you're testing for compliance, to kind of, follow up on what do you need to do, there's a checker within Acrobat. You run that checker, you're going to know that that document is usable by someone with an assistive technology. However, it will not fully verify that it is compliant with or conformant with WCAG. There's a lot of manual testing that goes into that. It also is not going to verify if it is fully conformant with PDF UA. Again, there is a lot of manual testing that goes into that. So any automated checker is only going to get you partway there. It will get you enough to know that it's usable. So if I, for example, worked at a disability office in a university and a student came in and said, the professor handed it out yesterday and we have to read it tonight, I would do a quick, let's get it tagged so that you can actually read it effectively and navigate it with your screen reader, for example, but I would not go to the level of PDF UA, which may take me several days, depending upon how long the document is and how complex it is. I'm not a legal expert, so take all of this with a grain of salt. The PAC3 checker it will check fully against PDF UA. It will not verify full WCAG conformance. Again, there is manual testing to do, and it will not automatically guarantee that you've met PDF UA because there is manual checking to do. So the thing to take away from this really is there is no silver bullet. And I caution people because there are you may hear someone say, oh, we have a simple solution that's going to guarantee it's 100% accessible automatically. There's nothing ever that's going to do that today. AI is just not that smart. There are things in remediating a PDF that as a human, I'm sometimes not sure how to do it. And if it's a human, I'm not sure how to do it. AI will never be able to do it. Another thing to think about is when you are reading a PDF, so you've done everything and you've got it perfect. It's PDF UA conformant, it's conformant with WCAG. It is 100% perfect document. So you've taken care of the first thing. You've got a well tagged. The quality of the tagging is excellent. Now, someone who's using assistive technology like a screen reader, not all screen readers are created equal, and not all of them fully support the PDF tags. So even though you've done all the work, it may not read well for a screen reader user. Examples of that are browser viewers for PDFs. They don't always even use the tag tree, and so what the user's going to get is anybody's guess. So the PDF reader, its support to the tag tree is also important. An untagged document can frequently be read. The problem is it's going to be like if you were to read a document of just run-on sentences, no structure, just a whole bunch of words and text. And so it's hard to read and understand. What I recommend, particularly when you are testing your documents, the best results are to make sure that you have a fully PDF UA tag document. You are using the NVDA screen reader from NV Access, which is free. It's an open source screen reader, and Adobe is one of the companies that funds it, and we fund it to make sure they fully support the PDF UA standard. And then use the Acrobat desktop reader because we also fully support the PDF UA standard. All right. So there are a lot of slides in here that I'm not going to go to that you can go back to and look at for details. And I'll talk about these when we actually get into the application itself. There are 4 tools that I use regularly. We have our accessibility tool. You can use it to auto tag a document. You can use it to run the full check. You can use it for setting alternate text. Quite frankly, I don't use it for auto tagging or setting alternate text because there are other ways of doing that. Enhanced scans. If you have a scanned document, I always enhance it first. That sharpens the text, that brings out, flattens the edges a little bit and just makes it easier for the text to be recognized. And then you can recognize the text. The prepare form tool. There are multiple ways that you can create form fields within a PDF. I always recommend using the prepare form tool. It makes your life simpler. As we go through this, you will understand that I am basically a very lazy person, and I like to do things in the easiest possible way. I suppose another way to say it, I'm an efficient person, but really I'm just lazy. And then organize pages. This is a wonderful tool to use. If you have a PDF that's already fully accessible and you need to edit just a page or two, you can use organized pages to actually pull those out, edit them, re-tag them to make sure they're correct, and insert them back in, and the tag tree will automatically adjust correctly, and you won't have to do any additional work. When you edit a PDF, it can sometimes corrupt the tag tree, and sometimes that means redoing a lot of work unnecessarily. All right, let's talk a little bit about the source document. When you think about PDF, if you have the ability to get to the source document is your friend. If you do everything right in the source document, depending upon the source document format, it will save you time down the road in remediating the PDF. Some source documents, however, don't allow you to create an accessible document itself, or don't allow you to convert to an accessible PDF. So it's important to know what you're using. Word is excellent at that. And we're going to do a little example with that. All right, so talking about examples, let's go to my Word document. So when you have Acrobat Pro DC installed on your computer and you're using Word, you will see an Acrobat option added to the tabs in the ribbon. You can also use Word Save as PDF, and in both cases, you will get a well-tagged PDF. We interpret the standard a little bit differently, and we are actually improving our conversion engine to try to save you even more time. But I encourage you to play with both and see which works best for you. But we're going to use the Acrobat one. So I just select the Acrobat tab. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of options. What we really care about is creating the PDF. I almost never touch anything else. I don't go to preferences. I encourage you to use what is set as a default in your preferences. You typically don't need anything else. What I do want to highlight is don't use enable advanced tagging. Whenever we see advanced, we always think, ooh, advanced is better. Advanced is not always better. And in this case, it's going to create a whole bunch of non-PDF recognized tags, and then it will role map them to the PDF tag. So it's going to create something that is kind of unnecessary. So I leave that off. So, I just don't even go into the preferences. I just click on Create PDF. And it's going to ask me to save this. I have no idea where this is going. Let's just.
Rob, are you sharing your desktop? Because I think we can still see the slides.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I am sharing my desktop. You should be able. Thank you. Let's go. Let's see. Let's go back to the controls here. Let me. Screen. All right. Thank you. All right, let's try going back here and see if that worked.
There we go. That's better. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's hide this controls. Okay, so I'll go back. My apologies. So if I am at the home, which is where I usually am in Word, you'll see over on the far right, we've added the Acrobat tab to the ribbon. And I was talking about this preferences option. You can see a bunch of other options, which you can use. Like I say, I rarely use those. And in the preferences is where we had this enable advanced tagging that I just don't use. So I just leave things alone there and I just go to create PDF. It's going to ask me to save it. I'll just save it to my desktop because I have no idea where else it was going. And when I use our conversion engine, it will automatically open the document in Acrobat for me. If you use Word Save As, you're then have to go and open the document in Acrobat. So you have to actually go find the document in your file. So now I have this document. So let's take a little look at Acrobat. Over on the right side is my tools panel. Not all the tools that I use for accessibility, notably the accessibility tool, is not automatically in this panel. You can go up to tools here on the upper left, and you can add it to the panel, and you can right click on the tool to move it up or down. So I have sorted these because that's what I do mostly is accessibility, and put the 4 tools that I always use for accessibility at the top. I'll close that panel for the moment. On the left is the more commonly used panel, and you'll see a bunch of icons. When you first get into Acrobat the first time, the bottom 3, the content panel, the order panel, and the tag tree are not in here. And you can just quickly right click in here and you can then select the panels that you want to add. Now, we've been talking about, oops. All right, we have been talking about this thing called the tag tree and tags. This is the tag tree. This is where, when I am fixing PDFs, I live probably 99% of the time. Because remember, back to the standard, it says the tag tree must be in the logical reading order. And I find it just easier to work in the tag tree. We've done a lot of things in the last several years to make it easier to work in the tag tree and not have to be constantly going between different panels or going to different tools. So you can see we created this. Now, the new standard isn't out yet that requires that there be a document at the beginning here, but we really should make this document, not section. And then you can see I have my heading 1, and you'll notice when I select the tag, I get this bright pink box around the content, so I can easily see what the tag is for the content. There's my paragraph, there's my H2, there's another paragraph, there's another H2, there's another H3. And so you can see, by having used styles in Word to set this up, I have a really perfect perfectly tagged PDF. And there may not be much that I have to do. I get down to my list. It's got my list tagged correctly. It does not have the label tag, which is optional. This is actually something we're changing. We will always put that in so that it's kind of the least common denominator approach. And then we get down, we got another list, a numbered list. We get down, we have a table. And so my table is created correctly. It's identified the first row as the heading because I set that up in Word that way. If I added alt text to my images in Word, we're fixing this. This figure should not be, excuse me, in the nested in the P tag. And you'll see my alt text comes through automatically. Excuse me one moment while I get a little more water. So you can see that there's little work that I would have to do with this if I did everything right in the source document and converted it. All right, so let's go into, oh, I'm already in the right place. Let's go into our PDFs itself. All right, so here I have a document where I've done things wrong. One thing that people commonly do with Word is, if they happen to know about using heading styles, they use them based on their visual look and not on what they really are. So for example, if I look at this heading, oops, sorry, let's go back to Word. Oh, I don't have that Word document. All right. So what I did in Word is I actually created this as a H4. And because I thought, oh, that's cool, I want that to be what my H1 looks like. Well, that's inappropriate. Excuse me just a minute. Oh my goodness, my apologies. And you can see I've done this. So I need to fix these. So I can just go into this in the tag tree, double click, and take that 4 and make it a 1. And now I have an H1. And I can do the same thing here. Double click, take that 5 and make it a 2. So I can correct those very quickly and easily in the tag tree. And you'll see further down where I've actually done it correctly. On my H1, my H2. Now, one of the differences between Word and between WCAG and PDF UA. PDF UA requires that you have a specific heading hierarchy and you follow that. An H1 must be followed by another H1 or an H2. An H2 must be followed by an H3 or an H1 so that you don't skip headings. WCAG actually says that you must have the heading that is visibly shown. So if I actually skipped headings, it would be appropriate in WCAG to skip a heading. In PDF, you're not supposed to skip headings. Also in PDF, I can have multiple H1s in the same document, where in WCAG, the convention is to only have one H1 on a page. So a little bit of difference there. All right, so that's kind of the simple, it's like, wow, it's pretty easy to change a tag. Now let's go into a few more complex things. So here's a document where I did not use word styles correctly. I did happen to use my heading styles correctly, but I did some other things wrong. So let's take a look at what I did wrong. And like I said, you can just arrow down. And for a long document, I don't do this. There are certain things I look at. I always check lists. I always check tables. I always check alt text. I'm not going to check every single paragraph on a 500-page document. I'm going to assume the conversion has been correct if I've checked several pages and they're right. And so I arrow down and I get to my H3 here and it says list of Canadian provinces by population. Then I did not use list styles in Word, I just indented. So we didn't know it was a list when we converted it and we made it all P tags. So what I need to do is I need to create my list. I do that by selecting the tag above the list, above where the list should start. Right click and say new tag. And then I can just arrow down to find the list tag and say, okay. Now, all of these things underneath it need to be part of the list item. The great thing about the little pink box is I can arrow down and make sure I've captured all of those. I can right click and I can go to properties and I can bulk edit the tag. And I'll just arrow up here and this should be a list item. And you'll notice on the left, it's automatically changed all that. I can close that. Also notice it's all still selected. So I can right click. You can drag and drop. What I like to do is use the keyboard. I don't drag and drop well. I can cut it, go to my list tag, right click, and paste it as a child. The list items should be a child of the list. So now I've quickly converted this into a list. All right, next thing is artifacts. If you have decorative images, you don't need an alt text on them. You're going to want to remove them. And in PDF parlance, you are artifacting it. The other thing that you really don't want are blank spaces. So back in the day when I learned how to type, we actually learned on manual typewriters before computers. I'm dating myself. And to put a space between paragraphs, you would do a carriage return and you have a blank space. Well, many of us still do that today instead of using paragraph styles. So for many times in a screen reader, when you get to something like a blank line, it will read it and it will say blank. Not the end of the world, kind of annoying. Where it becomes problematic is when people use, instead of using a page break style, they use a whole bunch of blank lines to push stuff down to the next page. So then a screen reader would get to the end of the first page and it would go blank, 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 blank. Am I done? Is it over? I mean, I'm confused now as a screen reader user. So it's good to artifact these. So what I should have said at the outset is there are many, many ways in which to accomplish the same thing in Acrobat. I'm showing you my way because I think it is the laziest way. But you may have learned a different way, and that's perfectly fine too. Artifacting is one of those things. What you want to do to artifact is go to the reading order tool. In the old days, you had to go to the order panel and then open the reading order tool and spend extra time. I can just select the space that I want to, and I like to choose it first here in the tag tree so I can see that pink box. And I can right click and I can go to the reading order tool directly from my tag tree. And what this allows me to do is then select that reading order number 18 and say, make it a background or artifact. And you'll notice immediately that 18 moved down to the next item. And if I go back over to my tag tree, and arrow down, you'll see that that blank space is now skipped. I can also just bulk select. So I can select the 19, I can hold down the control key, I've got the 21, I've got the 23, and I can say background artifact, all magically gone out of the tag tree. So I've cleaned that up very nicely. Now, when I get to images, and this is a little bit controversial, I've been called out on this. When I have an image that has a caption, and the caption says figure 1, so I know that there's an image there, or it could say image 1, and it gives all of the content that I want to refer to for that image. So images are always used in context. And so I could put alt text on this image and say, black and white dog, he's a border collie lab mix, sitting in a room with a TV behind him. I could give all that information, but that's really irrelevant to the context I was using this in. What I wanted to display is that my dog has a goofy grin. And we'll just increase the size of that a little bit. So I could go into the figure properties and add alternate text and say, my dog with his goofy grin. But the problem then is the screen reader will say, image, my dog with his goofy grin, figure 1, my dog with his goofy grin, which is kind of redundant. So when I have that kind of redundancy, I'm going to artifact that image because I don't need it. And like I say, it's a little controversial. You can choose the way you want to approach that. But when I get to an image like this, and I have a caption that says, a new neighbor comes to visit, and it is, I have no idea what that means. Is it, people who moved in next door, their children? No, it's a black bear sitting in my driveway, or actually standing in my driveway. So in that case, I definitely need alt text that says, black bear standing in our driveway on a sunny afternoon. Some people who create alt text would argue I don't need to say sunny afternoon, except when this was taken, I lived in Seattle, where it's normally cloudy and rainy, and so sunny afternoons are really important to us. So that's what I chose to put. All right, we'll come back to images a little bit more. Let's take a look at tables. So when you have a very simple table that has column headers and data cells, and it may have column headers and row headers in the case of this one. At this time, there's stuff I need to do. We're actually still working on fixing that, and I think that's going to come out in our next build. So I can go to the table in the tag, and as I mentioned in the past, I would actually have to go to the reading order, the order panel, and then go to the reading order tool to select the table editor. But now I can just select the table tag, right click, and go straight into my table editor. Now, there are things in my recorded trainings about how to set up the table editor and things like that. For sake of time, I won't go through that today. But what I am going to want to do is check my properties on my header cells. And you'll notice the different colors. So I've used red to indicate header cells, and I've used black or gray in this case to indicate the data cells. So I'm going to go into the table cell properties. And for every header cell, there are two things that are important: identifying it as a header cell and telling you what type of header cell it is. So you need to set the column or the scope, I'm sorry. And in this case, color is a column header. There are ways in Word to identify whether something is whether the first row are column headers and whether the first column are row headers. And we are working on fixing our conversion to actually grab that information and automatically set this scope for you. So there will come a day soon, hopefully by June, that you won't actually have to go in and do this for simple tables if you've done it right in Word, but I would still check it. So I can set that and just say, okay, I'm going to want to go to the row headers, and I can hold down my Shift key and select each of the cells, go into the table properties, and now these are row headers. And I'll say, okay. Now I'm going to select the midnight black, and I'm just going to double check and make sure that I got it. Yep, I got it right. This is really important for a screen reader, because if you do not set the scope, the screen reader is going to assume that every single header cell is a column header. And so if I were to be looking at this number 7 in the lower right corner of the table and ask the screen reader to tell me what are the associated header cells, it would say, and I had not set the scope, it would say trucks, color, ruby red, midnight black, triple yellow, which is incorrect. If I set the scope, it will say trucks, color, triple yellow. So the scope is really critical. All right, now let's go to a little bit more complex table. Whenever you have complex tables in your document, and a complex table, this is actually a very simple complex table, but a complex table is anything, any table that has merged or nested header cells. In this case, you'll see I have merged header cells for the quarters, and then I have nested header cells because I have the months. So if I go to this table in the tag tree, and I select the table editor, I'm still going to have to set my scope, but I'm going to go to this first quarter, select that, and go to the table cell properties. And there's two things I need to do. I need to set my scope. So I'm going to set that as a column header. And then I need to merge this across the 3 columns before it. So I need to tell that that header is associated to 3 columns. What you want to make sure is that your scope and your spans are using the same word. So I want to set the column span, not the row span. This is spanning 3 columns, not 3 rows. And I'll say, okay. And I will always get this message that says, oh, this is going to be a table that's going to be hard for assistive technologies to understand. That really isn't true anymore. Assistive technologies have advanced and have gotten pretty good at understanding tables where you have merged header cell. So you just say yes. Unfortunately, you can't delete that. And you'll notice my color changed because now I have this merged. And so I've selected my merge color to be this sort of lilac color. And then I can go down to January, February, March, and I won't do them all, but I can bulk select by holding down the Shift key and using my mouse key. You cannot use the arrow key. That will actually navigate the page. I'm going to right click, go to table properties, check that as a header cell, and set the column scope. And you can see that the color has changed on those. Okay, the last thing I want to demo in Acrobat today is setting alt text when you have a bunch of images. So I can go to my accessibility tool, and in there you will see set alternate text. I'm going to say, okay. You can turn this message off. Obviously, I don't because I use it for training. And it is automatically going to identify all of the images in my document. Now, if I had artifacted this image of my dog, this would not show up here. I can use the right and left arrows to navigate between images, to add my alternate text. We have a bug in the product. If you select direct decorative figure, it's not going to actually artifact that image for you. So don't use that right now. Stay tuned. We're working on getting that fixed. So if I go down to these images, I can say this is a, sunset with clouds, and I can go to the next one, and this has some weird text in there, and this is a sunset, I have to spell, through a wine glass. So I can do all that, and then I can click save and close. You don't want to click save and close until you've actually gotten through all of your images, but I'm going to hit save and close. All right. I'm going to switch out and go quickly back to my slideshow. And all of this is details and images and steps for how to fix things, everything that we just went through. So you also have the information in text as well. So I want to talk about some cool stuff. We all love cool stuff. So liquid mode. Some of you may already be familiar with this because this is already out. And this is powered by our AI, which is called Adobe Sensei. And what this allows you to do is take any PDF, pretty much. There's a few restrictions on size and a couple of formats, but you can take a PDF on a mobile device today. We are working on getting it on desktop also, but right now it's for mobile devices. You can open it and you can click on the liquid mode icon, which is a little water drop, and it will automatically use our AI to tag it and create an outline of that document. So you're able to quickly navigate. You can collapse sections within the document, and it makes it really easy. It supports reflow, which is one of the newer WCAG requirements. So you can increase the font size, and instead of having to pan and zoom and constantly go back and forth to try to read on your smaller screen, it will automatically reflow it, and you can just scroll down and read it. It is a wonderful little tool that I highly recommend. The other thing that we have added to that, out of our readability research, which we've done with some dyslexic organizations and several universities, we've studied reading among primarily school children, and found that when they can adjust the characteristics of the text itself, it can improve their reading speed and comprehension. And this is true for slow readers and also advanced readers. And so you can set the font size, you can set the spacing between characters, you can set the spacing between lines. This meets part of one of the other new WCAG criteria, and the content will now dynamically flow, reflow, and fit the screen size on any mobile device. And so this is really fun and exciting. What makes it more exciting to us is we are using this same technology to create this auto tag API that we are in pre-release right now. And if anyone is interested in their organization becoming part of our pre-release program, please reach out to me or Alistair, and we'll get you set up with the right people. But what this does is this will automatically tag an untagged PDF and give you things like headings and lists and paragraphs. It'll identify where the images are. It does not provide alt text because alt text really needs to be within context of the document. So it's hard to automatically apply good alt text. It will allow you to batch process. So you've got 10,000 untagged documents that you want to get them basically tagged. You can run it through this, and they'll all get tagged. you will need to remediate them, but this comes back to that, when is good enough good enough? This will give you a long way to being fully accessible. It will make it usable and readable and navigable, which is even more important for screen reader users, so they can navigate by headings. It isn't perfect. There are things, complex things like complex tables or alt text that you'll need to work on. But if someone needs to just be able to read a document, this is a wonderful tool. And it also saves about 40 to 60% of the time for remediating a PDF. The things it doesn't do well, complex tables, are the things that are the hardest to remediate. And so, you're really saving about 90% of your work, but in time, you're not saving that much time because you still have to do the complex stuff. We also have a thing called DocGen, which is also in pre-release, which will allow you to create an accessible Word template and have a database of information, student information. You want to send out a mass mailing to all students, but you want it customized for each student. You can create that template in Word that's accessible. It'll automatically convert it into an accessible PDF and populate it with all the data for each individual person that you're sending out the information. Things we're working on that are coming in the future: Extract, which will actually allow you to pull out key information. The example I have here is actually a list of diamonds, and it's like, I wanted to just find the ones that are premium grade. And so I would be able to say, hey, pull out the information on the premium grade diamonds, and would automatically do that and highlight those sections in the table. Data visualization, which is really, really hard to do, particularly with charts and graphs, to explain those. Think about trying to explain a chart in words, and it's just hard. And we're doing some deep research on this to understand data and coming out with new ways to visualize it and to actually present it in a non-visual manner. And also combine it with this extract concept where you can say, hey, what's actually the most important thing in this data? Well, maybe that, this is the highest item, or this is the lowest item. So those things are coming. Stay tuned. Resources. I mentioned our webinar recordings. I've done 6 webinars that take you from the very basics through scanned documents, complex tables, forms, and gives you all the instructions on how to make those accessible. It has exercises, documents where they are wrong that you can use then to create the right thing. And it also has the solution, so you can look at that and say, oh, yep, I did it right. If you want to read PDF standards, I've got links to those. And then there are links to some other helpful hints for Acrobat Pro. Okay, I managed to get through that with about 6 minutes left. So what have we got in the way of questions?
There were some questions, Rob, about scanning workflows and how people could go from scan to an accessible PDF file. There are some questions.
Sure, great. So I don't have a scanned document readily available, but let's just use a PDF and let me walk you through that a little bit. So let's assume this isn't tagged and this isn't an actual document. I would go to my I forgot to put that one up there. Hang on, let's find my little tool. Well, we'll do it the simple way. All right. So I can go to the Scan and OCR tool. You see the icon here on the right now. And what I would do is I always use Enhance first to scan document. So I would select Scan Document. What that allows me to do, like I say, it will sharpen the contrast between the text and the background. When like scan a book and you get that kind of rounded area, it tries to flatten that out some. And I may enhance it several times before I actually do the text recognition. So when I do this and I select Enhance, you'll see that I have an option to recognize text or not. I usually turn that off the first time, and maybe even 2 or 3 times I'll enhance it until I think, yeah, that's about as good as it's going to get. And then I'll turn that back on and I'll hit enhance, and it will automatically do the text recognition. And you'll be able to come up with the results of that, and you can kind of check it and see how well it did. You know, the quality of text recognition is based on 2 things. One, the quality of the document itself. And sometimes you have a scan of a scan of a scan, and it's not going to do a very good job. There are different tools that you can use to recognize text. We have one built in, but you can also use other tools that may do a better job for your type of scanned document. And then you can bring it in here and tag it. One thing that I do when I do have a scanned document that is really just garbage, I'm going to export that then into Word, and I'm going to let Word help me find the errors and correct them, because Word does a great job at finding misspellings and syntax issues and things like that. Next question.
I think there were some questions around producing accessible PDFs from InDesign and Illustrator.
Okay, great. So you cannot create an accessible PDF directly from Illustrator. Most people will go from Illustrator through InDesign. There are some very specific things that you need to do correctly in InDesign. It's like any other source document. If you don't do it right in the source document, it's not going to convert it well. There is a company called pubcom, pubcom.com, and you can go out to that website, and they actually have what I consider to be the Bible of creating an InDesign document that will convert well to a tagged PDF. Again, there are probably things you will need to remediate. And we are working on improving InDesign to make that process better and simpler. There's some changes that are going to be coming this year in that. But it is possible to create an InDesign document that is well formatted in InDesign to allow you to easily convert it to an accessible PDF. One of the biggest gotchas is layers, and people like to use layers in InDesign. Those really need to be flattened out before it's converted into a PDF. Otherwise, you'll need to do some extra work in the content panel in the PDF in order to get it to tag correctly.
There's a question about PowerPoint. So would you advise presentations with that presentations with speaker notes are converted to PDF, as they can fail the accessibility check and it doesn't appear you can bulk remediate those?
Yeah, that's a gap. The PDF notes are turned into comments, and comments are not really great from an accessibility standpoint in a PDF right now. When I convert, I just convert it without the speaker notes, because there is no real way to make those speaker notes accessible. One of the things that I've done, if I have a training where I have speaker notes that I want, it's called Train the Trainer, and I'm actually teaching people how to teach people how to create PDFs, accessible PDFs. And so there's a lot of documentation in there about how to speak about some of the things. And what I've done is I've just created a separate slide for those, and I hide those slides, or you can hide those slides when you're doing a presentation. But converting a speaker note does not work. The other thing that's really complex in PDFs right now are 2 things. One is you need to make sure you get your reading order right in PDF, or I'm sorry, in PowerPoint. And fortunately, they have fixed that. And I see that we're at time, so I will just say also quickly, grouped images are just a disaster. We have a fix coming for that in the June release also of Acrobat. So you will find that when you convert a PDF, and if you've done things right with the images in PowerPoint, they will convert correctly to a well-tagged PDF. I apologize that we're at time. If there are more questions, I will ask the moderators to collect those, and I will be happy to then, we can send out a bulk response to those questions.
Yeah, that's fine. I can grab the grab the chat and we can post it. I'm thinking probably the best place to post the kind of Q&A would be in our accessibility community Teams space, if people have access to that. I'll pop a link in the chat so that if you're not a member, you can join there. Let's see.
And I will also mention in the resources that my email is my last name, Haverty, Haverty @adobe.com. If you have questions, I would encourage you to go through the webinar recordings first. They will answer a lot of your questions. But after that, if you still have questions that are of more complex nature, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help you.
That's great. And just actually on the final, we've had a question there, and I was going to say, if we are posting your kind of the question answers in Teams, we've had a request of, would it be okay to share your slides there as well? So
absolutely, yes.
And have all the links in one place.
I will send you these slides, but all of this information is in more complete format in these webinars. And so you're welcome to use these slides as well. And like I say, I will send them to you, but you'll find the webinars have a lot of detailed information in them, which is why there are six of them.
That is great. And I will definitely, I can see some people popping in some more questions. If you do have more questions that you didn't have time to ask, please do pop them in the chat and I'll kind of grab them and send them in an email to Rob and we can follow up. But I just want to thank you so much, Rob. And I feel like you really soldiered on there. I know what it's like to have a cough and have to keep going, but you soldiered on. You need a rest now. Go and have a big cup of tea.
Thank you. My apologies for all that coughing.
Oh, no.
I thought I had it under control. I thought I fixed it yesterday, but apparently not.
Oh no, I know what it's like. And it's always the worst. It's the more you try not to cough, the more it happens. So thank you so much. And also as well, I think, Alistair, do you want to pop that link to the forum again, if you've not done it already?
Yeah, I popped it in, and we did get quite a few responses, so I will put that in again.
Just in case anyone missed it. So if anyone wants to speak to, if you joined us a bit later, you want to speak to Alistair, who's also from Adobe, based in UK, to just have a talk about things, maybe, arrange some training for your organization. And please do that. Please get in touch with them. Thank you so much. And lots of people today. Thanks for folks staying to the end, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll stop the recording.